secure, wouldn't they?
At the moment, they're secured at Rabta, which is about 65 kilometers southwest of Tripoli, and that facility is heavily guarded. But in extremis, if Saddam were to redeploy those troops, those stocks could potentially be vulnerable.
The United States has called for Libya's expulsion from the United Nations Human Rights Council, and the council is discussing Libya on Friday, the first time that it is holding a special session investigating one of its members. And AlJazeera's Scott Heidler joins me now from the United Nations. So, Scott, it seems like we're moving now from Security Council statements to Security Council resolutions. So does that mean that a resolution of some kind is pretty close by?
Well, Doji, we're closer than we were, say, on Tuesday when that press statement was issued by the Security Council. There's going to be a meeting Friday, 3 p.m. here at United Nations headquarters. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is going to be giving the Security Council a briefing. And we've been hearing from our sources that Security Council member states have been speaking on the sidelines, if you will, about potential draft language for a resolution. Potentially a Chapter 7 resolution, which is the mandate for the Security Council that gives them the teeth, if you will. That gives them the option of using military, sanctions, blockades, these kinds of things. So we're not there yet, but tomorrow's meeting is definitely going to be a step closer to that, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth. That press statement that you'd mentioned that came out on Tuesday, just for the 15 members of the Security Council to agree on the wording of that letter, it took 3 hours. So you can imagine when you talk about potential military intervention, potential sanctions coming through in a resolution, the wording of that resolution is going to be poured over, so that's going to take some time.
So if we look at Chapter 7, I mean, this is something that gives the Security Council powers to maintain peace, but underneath that there's a whole host of things that are potentially possible. The other thing that's quite interesting, I suppose, is how unified the rhetoric has been in terms of the unity of the international community. So does that mean that any likely resolution, if indeed there is a resolution that gets voted on, will not be vetoed then?
It's looking better, let's put it that way. We're not there yet, but yes, when it's been interesting to see the international community language, different leaders around the world. It sounded like reading from the same script almost, that the international community needed to act in unison, and that any further action should be done through the United Nations and then specifically the Security Council. So if you have the majority of the international community outside of just those 15 members sitting on the Security Council, and then the 5 permanent members who have veto power, if you have the international community saying, all right, this is the body, this is the place where action should be taken against Libya, you can imagine that there's a lot of pressure there. So maybe the certain divisions that normally exist within the Security Council, those lines might be wiped away because there's such a huge call for something to be done in Libya by the United Nations.
All right, Scott Heidler at the United Nations, thank you. Now, several hundred Americans, along with British and Canadian citizens, are stranded in Libya because bad weather is preventing their evacuation. It is the second day that the US-chartered ferry has tried to leave the As-Shabab port, but it can't because of 5-meter-high waves. In the meantime, a Canadian military plane has rescued a number of Canadians stranded at the Tripoli airport. And I'll be back with more news from the Americas a little later on in the program, plus a look at Libya's Latin American connections and how they have left the region divided in its response to Gaddafi's crackdown.
Well, after 4 days of searching in New Zealand, hopes of finding more earthquake survivors are now fading. Sniffer dogs are scouring the rubble, but the threat of aftershocks collapsing more buildings is hampering that rescue effort. Water, electricity and sewerage remain cut off for many, and fuel is running short. Well, Tanya Page is in Christchurch for us. Tanya.
Well, the death toll has been upgraded to 113, and we can only expect it to go even higher. That's because police have grave concerns for another 200 people, and that figure's been going up and down slightly for a number of factors. Firstly, because some people who had been reported missing have since checked in with police, but also Christchurch is a really popular tourist destination, so people overseas, families who know that their loved ones are in this area and who haven't heard from them for a number of days have reported them missing, and so some names are being added to that list. Earlier on Friday we heard from the Earthquake Commission. They've said that the city can expect to experience up to 10 aftershocks of between 4 and 5 magnitudes, so quite a jolt, and about 100 magnitude 3 aftershocks. Those are constant reminders of the pain and trauma inflicted on the city's people.
Tanya, how are officials now making progress with the battle to restore services for those who survived this quake?
Well, they're getting there, but you can imagine it's a pretty slow process, particularly because there's been some bad weather, a little bit of rain here, and there's a little more in the forecast as well. Now, what that means is that obviously they can't go out testing and doing a lot of electrical work because it's just not safe, and consequently that means if they don't have the electrics tested and cleared, they can't restore the water, and because of that, that means that the sewage stays down, so it's all an interconnected process. There is, however, we know about 75% of the city does have electricity, about 50% of the city also has running water. Also on Friday, another development is the arrival of the final few international crews. The teams from the UK, the United States and China have arrived on Friday, and there are about 300 Australian police here because the rescue effort is still that, it's still a rescue effort, despite the fact no one's been pulled alive from the rubble since Wednesday afternoon.
All right, Tanya Page there from Christchurch. In other news, Egypt's former information minister is facing corruption charges. Anas al-Fiqi is the 4th member of Hosni Mubarak's government to be arrested. The former state broadcasting chief, Fussam al-Sheikh, has also been detained. Both have been banned from leaving the country. Iraq's government has imposed a new curfew in Baghdad before planned demonstrations later on Friday. Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki is urging his people not to take part, warning they could be attacked by al-Qaeda. Thousands of people unhappy with the performance of their new government are expected to rally. Let's return to our top story. And jubilant protesters in Libya have been showing journalists what they've managed to seize in the city of Shahat. As Dan Nolan reports, it's a region with a long history of resistance.
Sitting atop seized army tanks, firing automatic weapons. These men are celebrating a war that hasn't yet been won. Like most of Libya's eastern cities, Shahat is now controlled by the people. Some are giddy with their newfound freedom, joyriding in tanks that once belonged to Muammar Gaddafi's regime.
These are ruins from the previous terrorist regime. This is what Gaddafi used to kill our children.
Shahat is in a province of Libya called Green Mountain, famous for its resistance led by Omar al-Mukhtar against Italian occupation a century ago. Media reports now emerging from Shahat and nearby Al-Baida say peaceful protests on